In this video, we're going to look at our Python-Flask WT forms and this running example we have, and we're going to add to it a numerical input. We're going to do both an integer and a decimal. So let's get started. So I want to move into my virtual environment, cdvenv down in the terminal, and then activate for me. In Windows, it's under scripts, subdirectory, and I'm doing the activate PowerShell command. And then I have already installed Flask WTF, so I don't need that. But I'm saying here that I have a number of apps in this virtual environment. I'm picking one. I'm doing a command line approach here, a PowerShell command line approach. And so I'm saying this is the one, this new one with the numerical input is the one I want. Let me say that I want to debug from the command line and then Flask run. For some reason, I usually just type that. Okay. And here's what we're going to be making. So I have this form. There's a place, as there was before, for a name to choose a programming language. I'll say Kotlin, color, I'll say green, and then a number of hours and a wage. So these are numerical inputs. Let's right-click and look at the page source. And so down here, there was a label for hours and an input for hours. It has the ID of hours, the name of hours. It's a type of number and the value of 20. And I'll show you the value of 20. I'll show you how I got that, show you how I got everything. And same thing for a wage. Oops. And I have more things in the wage. I have a step and a minimum, because it was a minimum wage. I could have a minimum for the minimum number of hours and made it 0. I just did not. Okay. So let's say they worked 30 hours at $10 an hour, and then they earned 300. And I've done, so it's hey there, hi there, ho there, Fred. So I'm going to show you different ways I can do some concatenating. And here's the language they chose, the color, me displaying the color, displaying the hours input, the wage input, and then I'm doing a calculation. And I'm showing the calculation twice because I do it in 2 different places. So I just want to show you can do it in 2 different places. One place I'm going to do it in Python, another place I'm going to do it in Jinja. Let's go back and show 2 things. What if I forgot to put in a name? And what if they worked more than 40 hours? I'm going to use 40 hours as my border for overtime. So the calculation changes if it's over 40. So now here I'm saying no name question mark. So I know whether or not they've entered a name. And here is the different calculation. So they worked 50 hours at a wage of 10, and I'm not just simply multiplying and getting 500, I'm getting 550. So I'm giving them for those 10 hours of overtime, the 10 hours that were over 40, I'm giving them $15 an hour, or time and a half. Okay, so that's what we have here. So this right now, I'm in the Flask part for the most part, which handles the routes. So I'm saying here's where my simple form is in another file. And clearly I'm using Flask. Render template is to go to the HTML files. URL for is to tell me the position, sort of the web position of certain files. Request is because I'm dealing with forms. Redirect because I'll send certain routes to other routes. I don't really need this at any point. I don't need this yet. I will need this at some point, but I just sort of like to do it from the beginning. So I have a secret key. I just have a silly secret key. And then this works in conjunction with when we're on the HTML form, this CSRF underscore token. My default route is redirected to my simple form. My simple form route handles, I say get and post. It's going to be a post. This route is going to handle both the form where the user enters stuff and the other HTML page, which handles the information submitted. And that's controlled by this if. If the form is submitted, I go to the handler. If not, I go to the numeric. I get the information. If it is submitted, I'm getting the information off the form. And then part of that information is the hours of the wage. And I've decided to do the salary calculation in two ways. And so here's one of the ways I'm doing it here in Python so I'm doing the calculation here before I send it over. So that way of doing it is I get from the result the hours and the wage. I'm casting them to the appropriate values int and float. I'm asking if the hours are over 40, here's my wage calculation. Otherwise, there's my wage calculation. And then I am sending the salary. I'm taking that salary and giving myself two decimal places, sort of turning it into a string, and then sending that salary over. So this is one version of calculating the salary. Okay, and it's not necessary because you can also do it in Jinja, but I just wanted to show you two ways. Okay, so that was mostly the Flask. Let's look at more of the WT forms. And what we're adding here are these integer field and decimal field. So that's the new part. The string field was for the name. The submit field was for the button. The select field was for the drop-down select. Here's the name. Here's the button. Here are the selects. We had that before. Here's the new part. Integer field hours, decimal field wage. So even though over in HTML, it's not going to make a difference, but over here you say whether it's integer or decimal, and you give it a label. So hours and wage will be the labels. Hours and wage is more like, I don't know, more or less the variable name or the key. As result gets sent around as a dictionary, these will be the keys of the key value pairs. And here's where I added a little bit of extra. So I said that when the page starts up, the value of the hours should start at 20. So in HTML, what's written in the box of a number type input is the value. And so I'm saying I want beyond the basics, I want a value attribute over in HTML to be set to 20. And I did even more for wage. I said I wanted a minimum of 725. I wanted a step of 0.05. So I'm going up sort of a nickel at a time. And then I set a value of 10. So let's go back to the form and we can, let me refresh. So there I'm starting at 20. There my wage is 10. I go up by 0.05. If I try to go down, it's sort of stopping. I can come in here and type 6, but if I use the up down arrow, I can't get below the 725. One has to do, there's validation, and then we can do something more to say, oh, if it dips below 725, yell and scream. This is just what's sort of easily available in HTML. Okay, so that's what this render underscore KW did, was sort of add some additional attributes when we go over to the HTML. So I showed you the routes, I showed you the WT forms. Now I'm going to move over to the form. It uses simple layout. Both of these HTML pages do simple layout, and then simple layout in turn uses a style sheet. So I'll give you a peek at those, but we send over a title, we send over a header, and then there's a place for content. Here's that form CSRF underscore token that we talked about before. Here's a place to put the label. In my previous examples, I put a break here. I've sort of changed that up. So I started putting them on the same line. Before I was putting the name, and then under it, I was putting the place to enter the name. I've changed my style a little bit. But here's the place for the name, the drop down for the language, the drop down for the color, the label for the hours and the hours, the label for the wage and the wage. So everything here in the HTML, this is the Jinja, but it all appears to be similar looking, but these are different types of things in HTML, but that's all being handled by the WTF for me. That's its job. And then finally the submit button. So that's what's on that page. I haven't changed anything in the layout, so I'm not going to show that, but I did change the style a little bit, so I'll show you the new parts of the style. I styled a label. Now that the labels weren't on lines by themselves, but on the same line, I gave them an inline block and a specific width. I gave them a display of inline blocks, so then I could give them a width, and then I gave them a width. Inline means they'll share space on a line with something else. Block means I can apply a width to them. And so all of these labels have the same width. So that's what that style's doing for me. And then here I said that inputs of the number type. So the submit button was of an input and the text was an input, but this is just the number type inputs, which are the last two, the wage and the hours. And I'm saying I want them right aligned. So if I enter a name like Fred, it's left aligned, but the numbers were right aligned. So that was that style. Okay, layout hasn't changed. The only thing I have left to show you now is the handler. And there is some work over here on the handler because that is, I also do the calculation, the salary calculation in Jinja, which is over here in the handler. Use the layout, title, header, here's my content. We looked at a Jinja comment before, so there's just a Jinja comment. And Jinja has control structures. So here was if I'm getting a name, if result name was indeed sent. So we said, as you recall, if it says Fred, then it's hey there, hi there, ho there. If there's nothing, then it says no name. So that's what this does. If result, you just have to say if the result. So if there's nothing, it will jump down to the else and says no name. Otherwise, it says hey there, hi there, ho there. And the curly is what we're getting from the result square bracket quote name. And I can just have some text outside of the curly. I can have text inside the curly and do a replacement. So I have hi there, %s, and then another %, and then the result name. So that will get substituted back in. Or I can say ho there, and then curly's quote, and then a dot format, and then result name. So these are both ways of, these are all three ways of concatenating in different ways information into, information that came from the form and adding additional text. So just different ways of doing the same thing. Pick your favorite, display the language, display the color, use the color. This is the thing that confuses Visual Studio Code the most. Using the color within the style, using the result color within this background, within the style of the div. So that works. There was no problem with that, but but Visual Studio Code is finding it very confusing. Just displaying the hours, just displaying the wage, but displaying the wage with some casting. So I'm saying the result is, I'm casting the result as a float. That's here, and then I am displaying it with 2 decimal places. So that's sort of twofold, some formatting to get the 2 decimal, to ensure that I'm getting 2 decimal places. So I had to cast it, and because this type of formatting belongs to float, so I had to cast, make sure it was understood as a float. It was probably just came off of form. Most things that come off of form are strings. So cast as a float, then I can format it with 2 decimal places. Here's the Jinja version of the calculation. So first I have to make sure that my data is understood in the right, and it has the right type. So I am setting a variable I'm calling h equal to result hours, and that's an integer. And the same thing for w with the wage, except this time it's a float. So I get my information over and into the right type. And then h was the hour. So then I ask, again, Jinja has control structures. If the hours were greater than 40, here I'm calculating the salary for the 40 hours times the wage plus the overtime hours, h minus 40 times the wage times 1.5 time and a half, and displaying the answer. Otherwise, it's just the hours times the wage, and displaying that. Or finally, at the end, I'm just displaying the calculation that I sent over separately. So this is when I calculated it in Python and sent it over sort of as a separate, that was way over here. I had done the calculation in Python and sent it over as an additional argument in render template. So just 2 ways of doing the calculation. So that's what I wanted to show you, numerical inputs. Working with the numerical input, so I had some casting, doing some calculating. I can calculate over in the Python that handles the route. I can do the calculation over on the handler using Jinja. That they are both server side. So if I'm looking here, viewing the page source, there's no indication here of the ifs and the calculation and what have you. It just, so there's, you see no Jinja. So Jinja was handled and given and sent down to the web server after. So it was, you don't see the Jinja, you don't see the Python, you only see the HTML. You could see, if you had some JavaScript, you could see JavaScript. I don't have any JavaScript. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. I will make this available in a comment. Thanks for your attention.